All right, guys, it's Stephen here on BlueMoonRisingTV, and we've signed the Colombian Wonderkid Marlos Moreno. So we've dragged in Kristan Heneage, who knows a little bit about him. He went to COPA America only recently, and he's obviously worked with ITV, Guardian, 442 and all that. How are you doing, mate? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm not too bad. As you rightly said, I was at Copa America where I was fortunate enough to catch a little bit of Marlos playing. So I've been able to see him up close, which is part of the reason I'm quite excited about him coming to City.
Yeah, I mean, what do you make about him stylistically? Because I think it's fair to say quite a few City fans probably haven't seen much about him, other than the general YouTube clips. So how does he play stylistically?
Well, I think if you've watched those YouTube clips, you're probably going to agree with me in terms of saying he's an explosive player. He's someone that has kind of real speed to him. Just explosive is the best word I can use for it. He's someone that can play anywhere across that attacking three, so right, left, or centrals. Played there for his club. Started out actually as a number 9, but then Juan Carlos Osorio, who is now Mexico's head coach, and was working with him at club level at the time, actually moved him out wide to exploit that speed a bit more and use those athletic elements that he has to his game. So I would say that he's the kind of player that actually, when I watch him, Charlie Masonda Jr., the Chelsea youngster, I just see slight, just little comparisons with him and the way that he plays as well. So I think there's a lot to be excited about with him.
Well, I've seen Charlie Masonda Jr. in the Youth Cup final because I go to the academy game. So if he's like him, that's great because he's a fantastic player. And it's mad that he's not already in the Chelsea first team, in my personal opinion. But how did he get on then during the Copa America for Colombia?
Well, this is the thing. I wrote at the time, I kind of tipped him to be one player to break out because he's around the right age.
Yeah.
You kind of expected he would get some. He didn't get as much game time as I thought he would and hoped he would. He did manage to score. He scored against Costa Rica. It was a fairly decent goal, to be fair.
Yeah.
But he just didn't get as much sort of match time as you want. And in general, Colombia were a funny beast at that tournament because on the one hand, you had all the expectation of the World Cup and the excitement. But really, I don't think Peckerman made the best of the situation. I actually think he fluffed it a bit.
Yeah.
But going into the tournament itself, the talk was he was coming to England, but not to City. The talk was he was coming to Liverpool. That was the kind of consensus in Colombia was he's all but kind of guaranteed to go to Liverpool. They really want him. So I think actually in securing this deal, City have managed to nab a high-quality youngster with real potential. So I think they should be really quite pleased with themselves for being able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the fee as well, it's only £8 million apparently. And I saw quite a few quotes. Obviously, you're a big fan yourself, and I've seen Tim Vickery from BBC said he's probably the most exciting talent he's seen since like Sanchez and Aguero in South America, which is a massive play given the facts of Gabriel Jesus, another player we'll into, is based there. But he seems to be like very highly rated. The one thing I want to ask though is why is it, do you reckon City are loaning him out to Deportivo La Coruña? That's apparently the move they're going to make instead of getting him involved straight away.
Well, I think to draw a comparison to Masonda again, loaning him out gives him the opportunity to have consistent game time. I'm not sure. It is always very difficult when someone moves from a different culture and all these kind of things, whether their football translate instantly. I don't know if Pep Guardiola has that opportunity to take risk is perhaps the wrong word, but the opportunity to let him make those mistakes. It's better if he does it somewhere away from the club, and he will do that at Depor. He'll have the opportunity, in theory, to make mistakes, to learn in an environment that probably isn't as high pressured. Actually, I mean, there is no probably to it. It's not as high pressured as Man City. So I think for that, it makes a lot more sense actually to do that. And if you look at Chelsea, the team that you could argue specialise in loaning youngsters out, they do that as well for the same reason. It gives the players the real demands of first team football, which are hard to replicate in these elite development squads and all these other avenues. But if they make a mistake, it doesn't really impact them. So there's not a great deal of downside for the clubs when they do this. So I think that's really why it's being done. It's not any, I think, stance against his talent.
I mean, it's probably also, I wouldn't be surprised if his agent and the player himself probably push for that idea as well, because I think that a lot of footballers these days are wise enough to know that they can get lost in the muggy cloud of youth players that kind of drift around all these teams. All these great teams have all these great young players. So it's harder for them to make a name. If you can go on loads of Deportivo La Coruña and become a star there. And I think, were they like 15th last year in the league or so, he probably should get games, you'd think. Then it kind of makes sense for me. I mean, but that does touch on another thing that City fans have been noticing recently. But there tends to be a bit of a change of transfer policy. I think we all thought as City fans there might be a few big stars coming in. And we have signed Gundogan, he's a very good player, and obviously Nolito, Spain's left winger. But it tends to be like the next stars as opposed to the current ones at the moment. And Moreno does fit this bill. We've seen, obviously, we're linked to Gabriel Jesus as well, and Zinchenko. Do you think it's a conscious decision from City to move towards kind of building for the future? And Moreno, does he come under that?
Most definitely does. I think if you look at City in general as someone who comes at it from an outsider's perspective, there's been a definite change. If you go back to sort of the start of this era, when the money comes in, when the club's ambitions really ramp up, there was a quality of youth player, the likes of Stephen Jordan, Stephen Ireland. They just weren't good enough for what was needed.
Stephen Jordan gives me nightmares still.
They were serviceable, I think, for the previous era, but not for the current one.
Yeah.
There needed to be an improvement on that in terms of what was actually coming out. It was showing that players could be produced, but just not at the quality level that was needed. So you get the infrastructure upgrades, you get the investment on that side of things, but it hadn't quite produced anything yet. In fairness, there was no real time to produce anything, so I think it was a little bit unrealistic to say that. As we're moving forward, though, as you see the likes of Bersan Celina, those kind of players coming in, that's doing it from inside. You then also, I think, need to go out and bring players in who then you can improve yourself, because you're not going to be able to find 11 players to bring through. I think that's a slightly unrealistic, if not utopian dream. So he is perfect for that in that sense. And I think you're completely right. It does kind of move to that idea of bring them in younger, potentially cheaper. Obviously, Sane is one that you've talked about that won't be cheaper, unfortunately, because he's already burst through and established himself. But when you can go in and identify this talent, again, the Chelsea comparison, I'm sure it's not one City fans want to hear, because in their head there's only one team in blue. Look at the way that Andreas Christensen, these kind of guys have come in for relatively low fees, and they're either sold for bigger fees, which then fund other deals, or they come into the first team and they do something and they contribute. I think every major club now, every club with big ambitions, has to either look at that as a method to use, or at least actually implement it themselves as if to supplement other avenues.
I was chatting to a friend the other day, and with obviously the likes of Moreno, Zinchenko, Gabriel Jesus, and there's another one I forgot to mention, Sane. If they come off, its totals around £80 million. It sounds a lot on paper, but when you consider the fact that players go for crazy amounts of money these days, and one of those players themselves, if they become as good as they potentially could be worth nearly that on their own. So I guess City probably think the idea of, even if just two of them make it at City, they're probably going to be worth £35 million players anyway on their own, and that recoups that money there, and then they can potentially, in terms of theory, and then they could sell one or two on. Say Zinchenko only plays a few games, but we sign him for $2 million, and then we sell him on for 15. It's sound business, isn't it? I guess, and that's the way football's going.
Exactly, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The talk of the Moreno fee is around 8 million, give or take. So if for argument's sake we say it's 8 million, and we say he's on roughly 10,000, 15,000. His wages are about then 520,000, a year.
Yeah.
That means that for every year, to look at it maybe from an FFP perspective, you're only paying about 2.5 million for him. So again, financially, it just makes a lot of sense, because if, unfortunately, say he doesn't achieve his potential, it means that you've only lost 2.5 for every year that he's there. So if he has a 5-year deal, stays there for 3, you've lost about 7.5 million. If it's less, then it's, so on and so forth. So actually, from a financial perspective, it makes a lot more sense than, let's go back to the start of that period that we talked about, the likes of, say, Roque Santa Cruz, who cost 18 million and then was on huge wages as well. In a direct comparison, financially, it makes a lot more sense. And I think just in general, from talking to people who were inside City, I think they're starting to become a lot shrewder with the money and realise that actually they need to be a little bit more considerate with how they spend it, and also look at ways to really maximise the spend across the years moving forward, rather than just, can we get this big player for money now?
There was a great quote actually from Guardiola. I think it's in his book. I think everyone's read his book, every page. But there was a quote how he likes working with young players because he sees them as they actually learn. He said there's no second guessing or anything like that. They're just there to learn. He said it's like squeezing orange and getting the juice out of it, because you see them physically improving on the training ground. I can see it. Pochettino's the same. He loves young players for that same reason. And that's why I'm kind of encouraged as a City fan watching the pre-season friendlies. He's been big on the likes of Angelino, Maffeo, Adebayo, and I can see the likes of Moreno and so on, as Zinchenko potentially being these little projects for him. Obviously we saw Kingsley Coman come on loan, and then do wonderful things at Bayern. And I'm wondering if in a year's time, Guardiola will get his hands on Moreno. I think this is a raw talent I can really hone. I mean, what chance? Do you think it'll be another year that he'll come back, or do you think he'll go on loan again? And like, what's the chances of him fulfilling this potential at City? Potentially,
I think to answer the first question, that's very difficult because I would want to see him in La Liga first. I think he's got a lot of potential. There is definitely talent there. You can see it every time he picks up the ball. He definitely was a difference maker for Atletico Nacional. There also are things that need to be buffered out. He was a little bit selfish at times when he could have been a little bit more shrewd with the ball, I think. And yet, saying that, there was also instances where he would look to pick up the ball and just pass it straight away and instigate a move and be quite focused on the team. So there are things that need to be smoothed out. And I think, in fairness, if anyone's going to do that, I think it's Pep Guardiola. You look at the relationship he had with Joshua Kimmich at Bayern. Yeah, that's the kind of, I think, one-on-one situation that really, I think any player in the world would appreciate, especially any young player, because it's guiding you through a game. Someone who, I think, and this is very important, not only has won things as a manager, did things as a player as well. Yeah. I think it can be a lot more difficult. We look at, say, Rafa Benitez at Real Madrid. One of the reasons he struggled was because he didn't have that stellar playing career. And so there were players, he famously told Modric to stop using the outside of his foot to pass the ball. And players took kind of offence to that because they thought, well, you've never played, you've never done this. And I do understand why they think that way. I'm not sure if it's something necessarily subscribed to.
It's ego, isn't it, I guess, a little bit. Like, people intend to socially not trust people who haven't done it. And I mean, it's probably a little bit naive, but I can understand. He's also, even Guardiola himself, apparently likes Chicky Bergenstein because he was a player as well, and a successful player. And that's one of the reasons he's not just a businessman. And he sees him as a football person as well. And even manager like Guardiola, a very reasoned, intelligent person, can still put more value into someone who's played the game. It's probably only logical that play as well. But that's apparently a big reason why Moreno joined City. Guardiola apparently spoke to him briefly on the phone, convinced him. We've seen quite a few stories about that, about players being spoken to, but directly by the manager. I want to see him at City. I'm hoping we will do. Where do you think his long-term position is? Because obviously he can play several different roles in an attacking sense.
I think right wing. That's where I think he'll fit. But again, it's that difficulty of it. It depends relative to the game he's about to come into. Yeah. He might find success being on the left. Like I say, my gut tells me it's the right wing. I don't think he'll find a career as a forward personally. Okay. It's not anything to do with size. I just think he's better when he's running into things. I don't think...
He's fast, isn't he? I've noticed a lot of pace.
He's exceptionally fast. I mean, again, South America in general, if you're not talking about Moreno at the minute, you're talking about Gabigol, the Brazilian striker. To compare for a brief second, a lot of people said, he was the new Neymar. Actually, if you look at him, I see a lot more of Aguero in him. Yeah. I don't see Aguero in Moreno, if that makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. I think a further back position, out wide, it just makes the most of his talents. I think it allows him to really maximise that explosiveness that we talked about earlier on.
In general, because we'll start to wrap it up, but would you say this is a good move for City in general? I think the City fans should be excited about him in the long term.
Definitely, I think you've got every right to be excited. Yeah. Again, he's personally is someone that quite enjoys the trajectory of long players and really, studying someone at a younger age and then seeing them progress. I think this is the kind of deal that should excite you because, again, it's the club going out and really stamping a mark and you could argue beating a rival in Liverpool because, as I said, the general consensus in Colombia was he was going to Liverpool. The only thing I'll say is be careful when you fill out the form for his registration because his parents made an unfortunate error in terms of they intended to call him Marlon and wrote Marlon in, but the hospital misread it, and that's why he's called Marlos.
It's amazing. He got his name wrong, so I know he's called Marlos. Is pretty cool though, so I would take that if I was him. It's better than Marlon.
Well, they still call him Marlon. That's the thing.
Do they? So he's Marlon Moreno.
So he may look aloof on the training field if he doesn't respond to Marlos.
I'm sure Pep will deal with him some way or another. But yeah, thanks, mate. I'm excited by this transfer. I think football's at its best when I know he's not unheard of, but instead, I find the idea of signing an £8 million player from Colombia a lot more exciting than signing Toni Kroos. I know that sounds mad, I know the different players, but in general, I find the idea of the unknown and seeing a player reach the potential at the club a lot more intriguing. It's the same reason we all signed Wonderkids on Football Manager. You know, when we were younger, we all did it because it's like seeing these players become ours, so to speak. It will never be one of our youth players, but he'll be a player that reaches potential, potentially, I see. And for that reason alone, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do when he finally joins the club a year from now. But Kristan, thanks, mate. You've been absolutely brilliant. Everyone, go and check out his work on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle?
It's at KHENEAGE.
And your articles are everywhere. You pop up all over our timeline. So, and we'll get you back as soon as we get any news on any other players. You'll know. Thanks very much, guys. Guys, get in the comments below. Let us know what you think of the signing. Drop a like on the video, subscribe, and we'll see you soon.